Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. At this time, we're going to move on to our next session. This is about national mapping programs. I'd like to introduce Brian Raber, MAP's past president. Brian is with American Company, and he's going to moderate our session.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Welcome, everyone, to the MAP's Business Dialogue on National Mapping Programs, Past, Present, and Future Successes. As Mark said, my name is Brian Raber. I'm with American Company. I'm pleased to moderate this session and be with a panel of well-known, recognized, dedicated federal geospatial experts. The basic agenda for our next hour and a half will include the presentations from 3 agencies. Those will be about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And then following presentations, we'll have a dialogue with those agencies. And that's where they'll discuss some of the things related to their programs. And then that's when we'll also entertain the questions from all the folks in the audience. And just as you know, please use the Q&A features at the bottom of the screen to interact with us and answer, ask your questions. And now I'd like to introduce the panelists in the order that they're going to present. First up will be Nancy Blyler. Nancy Blyler is the Geospatial Community Practice Lead for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Nancy is a frequent contributor to maps and geospatial events because of her outreach and responsibilities with the community. We're glad that Nancy has the time to help us with this dialogue. Next up will be Kevin Gallagher. And Kevin is the Associate Director of the Core Sciences Systems of the United States Geological Survey. Kevin and his team has been systematically leveraging USGS expertise and collaboration with all levels of government to create national elevation, hydrography, critical minerals, and other databases. So we're really glad Kevin's with us today.
Great to be here. Thanks.
And batting cleanup for us is Tony LaVoi, and Tony is the Geospatial Information Officer, the GIO, for the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, also called NOAA. Tony and his team are responsible for the enterprise geospatial projects, strategies, policy development, standards, and coordination activities across all of NOAA. So those are our 3 panelists. And without further ado, we'd like to kick it off. And Nancy, you're first up.
Thanks for the invitation. And I'm really happy to be here to do this. So I started at Corps headquarters in 1997, and at that time, it was really common in that time to hear people say, "Oh, it's all about the data, right? It's all about the data." And there was this understanding in the geospatial world that, data was key to implementing any kind of an enterprise geospatial program. So now in 2020, in the Corps and in many other organizations, you hear this affirmation outside of the geospatial world that the data is really key. You hear things like we're a data-centric organization, or in the Corps we say we're a data-driven enterprise. And this concept, this data being key, is a really important concept, especially when you work for an agency like the Corps, that we really don't have a large, what I would consider a large mapping program like USGS or like NOAA. So I thought I'd take a few minutes this afternoon and just kind of walk you through the evolution of the Corps' geospatial data strategy, where we've been and where we're going. So the Corps has a very diverse mission set or space. And because of that, we have a really diverse geospatial footprint to support those mission areas. We have our large civil works program with navigation, flood control, water supply, recreation. So this is one of our big ones, right? And then military programs is the other one, military construction for Army and for Air Force. But we also have a large real estate mission. We do all the real estate, real property management for the Army and for the Air Force, as well as our civil works lands. Homeland Security, we have a large program there, as well as a very large interagency support program where we do work for other federal agencies, state, locals. We do work for the Veterans Administration, Department of Energy, all of those. And so it's not unusual for our geospatial folks in the Corps to 1 week work on land parcels for real estate, and the next week do flood inundation mapping, or work on recreation sites that the Corps is responsible for. So, I don't know of any other federal agency where our geospatial, the geospatial diversity, because of the support of the mission, it's just a very vast area and very diverse. So the question, or I guess a problem statement, has always been, how do you take all of this diverse project data and develop consistent national data sets out of it? People rarely come to me and say, hey, I'd really like to have this one lake project down in southern Alabama or something like that, or I just want all the information, all the flood data for the Mobile district. They want and they expect it to be national, and so that's always sort of been what we've tried to strive for, is how do you do that? Now, we do have some national data sets. Our Inland Electronic Navigation Chart, National Levee Database, and the National Inventory of Dams. These are all considered national geospatial data assets. And these have been pretty straightforward largely because of the funding. They have line item funding, so it hasn't been as challenging for those. But, what about the rest? What about all that other project information? And that's where these key enablers are critical to what I would consider our mapping program. And there's really nothing new here, right? Geospatial data standards, data governance, policy, processes, people, or 3 Ps, right? And funding. So these are what I would consider our key enablers. Early on, we realized we needed a comprehensive data standards, ones at the feature level with clear definitions and data models to go through that, go with those. In the spatial data standards for facilities, infrastructure, and environment, SDSFIE, we put those in place in the mid-90s. They were paper at that time. They've really come a long way in partnership with the Army's programs, Air Force, and Navy. They're now all online, very easy to get to. We expect our contractors to use this as well as using them in-house. And this is one of our really true key enablers to pull all that data together into comprehensive national data sets. So I've been asked before often, like, how do you implement data standards and consistent data management practices? Well, there's no magic. It's all just carrots and sticks. The carrots have been, we provide the funding for different programs to help with data modeling and to get them to use the standards. We'll do that for you. We talk about the benefits. If you implement the standards, you'll get quality data. Data interoperability will be able to integrate more easily across the enterprise. I also showcase examples quite often when we see some good examples of implementing the data standards. And then the sticks. So because we're in the Army, we have something called the Command Management Review metrics, and that's basically, I call it the embarrassment method, right? You're red if you're not doing well, and you're green if you're good. So we do have that, and I've reported on the implementation of standards at a high level. So that's one way of doing it. And then also look at funding. You know, if you're going to go off and do this, you're kind of on your own, and that's just the nature of the beast, right? We've got our carrots and sticks. But I think probably one of the most important things is this patience and being persistent. And basically, that's me just going, hey, we're not going away. These standards aren't going away. I'm just going to keep asking you every 3 months or so, have you done it yet, right? And just keep after you. And so that's really what I think has been the most effective is really just keeping after folks to do it. I mentioned governance as a key enabler, and because we're in the Army, the Corps has a very strong governance structure that's inherent to it. You know, we have our headquarters at the top level and our divisions and our districts, and at each one of those levels, we have geospatial leads. At each of the MSCs, our divisions here, we have geospatial managers, and then all the district offices have a geospatial lead, and some of those leads are they're branch chiefs for large branches. They're very robust capability there. So that's been very helpful. Policy, we have a lot of geospatial policy. When I say policy, I'm talking about, you know, mandatory elements, processes. I really feel process, if you can tell people step by step exactly what they need to do and it makes sense, usually people will follow that. If it doesn't make sense, you're not going to, or if you don't give them the step-by-step processes, they're not going to do it. And then obviously the people, outlining training, career paths for them, that kind of thing. So we've had, over the last 20 years, our policy has grown and it's become more and more detailed. We continue to update it. We have engineer regs, engineer manuals. There's just a few here. And then funding, right? That's always the tricky one because a lot of it's out of your control. I mentioned we do have a number of authorized and appropriated data sets, the National Inventory of Dams, INC, and the NLD, and also the Topi-Bathy, the Geospatial program, the LiDAR collection there. Those are all congressionally authorized and have they have a good amount of funding that's been consistent over the years. So they're all in very good shape. We have a few that Army has directed us to do, formally and funded. You know, formally used defense sites, the FUDS program is all geospatially enabled. And then they have funded over the last few years the installation Real Property Boundaries Initiative, where we get all the Army installation boundaries and roll that up into a national data set and send that over to them. So, but these other ones, the other mission support ones that don't have that, that's really where those key enablers come into play. These are all data sets that are created through mission support activities. And this is, like I said, this is really where those standards, the governance, the policy, all really come into play and are critical. So how has it worked? Well, you know, the answer, I think, is not too bad. These are data sets all kind of coming together. And what we have here in the red here, this is from the National Levee Database. We have a dam here from the National Inventory of Dams. This peach color here is from our real estate database. That's the property around this lake that we own and manage. And the green here is the recreation sites around, again, a different data set managed by a different part of the organization. And the blue is from water management, yet another part of the organization. So the answer is it's working okay. It's not horrible, right? It's working pretty good. So now here we are in 2020, and what's changing? That's been the strategy for the last 20 years, and now we're here, and the answer is not a lot has changed except for one big thing, and that's this recognition by the rest of the organization, or realization, I should say, of the importance of data and of being a data-centric organization. You know, the Corps, like everyone else, wants to move to artificial intelligence and embrace machine learning and all of these. And if you don't have good data management practices or curation of the data, you are not going to be able to do that. And that's really what the difference is really taking out geospatial out of all of these enablers that we've been working on for years. And this became really clear to me not too long ago when we got some policies started coming down from DOD and Army, and we established in the Corps Data Governance Board. And it's the Data Governance Board will ensure the USACE information technology enterprise meets the Army's objectives for visible, accessible, understandable, trusted, interoperable, and secure data. And you look through this and you see things like metadata and shared spaces and data services and integrating data and authoritative sources. These are all things that we're very familiar with in the geospatial arena, but it didn't come from us, right? So that's really, in my mind, is really pretty exciting. And so we're seeing this coming down from DOD. This was just published, I think, a few months ago. And Army's pushing it down, and now sort of that's where you see it being implemented within the Corps. And this is our vision statement, our data vision statement, that we're a data-driven enterprise. So again, really very, very exciting. Like I said, we stood up a data governance board that's chaired by our Deputy Commanding General. It doesn't get too much higher than that, a little bit higher, but that's pretty good. And the mission is, you know, USACE will transform how it does business by recognizing data as a strategic asset while consistently and accurately delivering authoritative, timely, relevant, secure data to decision makers throughout the enterprise. So again, like you could have blown me over with a, you know, there's just huge. And we're really putting in a lot of thought into how we want to set this up. But it's complicated, and it's complicated because of that diverse mission space that I talked about at the beginning. It really is not straightforward when you've got so many different types of data sets. But we're also seeing policy being issued that addresses geospatial data management and distribution as part of overall policy, not just separate geospatial policy, but it's really sort of embedded and integrated in with the overall policy. This is an engineer circular that was just published, I believe, a few weeks ago, that just, it basically says, you know, the Corps' flood inundation maps, we've been doing those for years. Internally, for dam and levee, their dam and levee safety breach scenarios. Do a lot of mapping internally for that, for our own infrastructure. And this policy is basically saying by November of 2021, all of that information will be publicly available. And I didn't write this, right? This didn't come from the geospatial community. This is from the dam and levee safety community. So this is huge. So we're really very excited about this. Our mapping, modeling, and consequence, the MMC folks that do the flood inundation mapping for the Corps, they've developed a public viewer, and you're going to see more and more of this data accessible through that. This type of internal dialogue and policy development really allows the Corps to be more effectively share with our federal partners and the public, such as the National Water Center. So these standards here that were developed, these interagency standards, we've implemented it in our spatial data standards, and that was done by design. We worked with them, but then we kind of backward engineered into our data standards. And this viewer that I showed earlier, This is actually sitting on the Amazon cloud so that it's easier, it'll provide easier access to our partners and to the public. So this example here, this is an example where we have the 3 different agencies, the Corps, USGS, and NOAA, all producing consistent flood inundation products over different geographies. The Corps only does this where we have infrastructure. We only produce FIMS for where we have dams and levees, and we rely on the other federal agencies. We want to match what they do, but by no means do we do this across the country. So this is really important, I think, in getting this information out to the public and making sure that it's clear and consistent across all the federal agencies. One thing I will note about this partnership also, it's not just geospatial folks. This is the geospatial personnel with hydrologic folks across the 3 organizations. So again, it's integrating that geospatial, the work that we've done for many, many years in with other folks. In addition to this agency-wide policy, we're also seeing more dedicated funding to improve data distribution and management. You're going to see more consistent, reliable water level data coming out of our core water management system through the Access to Water application. Last year, we modernized the National Levee database to get more information, both geospatial and non-geospatial data out, and not just the maps. We really want to looking at developing more comprehensive web services and documenting those data sets more robustly. We're also taking, this year we've been working on, I think it comes out next year, taking what we learned with the National Levee database and implementing that with the National Inventory of Dams. So again, you're going to see much more information coming out of the Corps with respect to what's in the National Inventory of Dams. There's a lot of information, non-geospatial, that will be coming out with that. And we're looking to integrate the National Inventory of Dams and the National Levee database much more easily. So you'll be able to go between the two, really leveraging off of what was done with the National Levee database. Oops. Okay. And we're also looking at modernizing some of those mission support data sets that I spoke of earlier. We secured funding this year to modernize the USmart system. This is our survey monument archival and retrieval tool, all our geodetic control and boundary points. And so that will be modernized, updated, user interface overhauled. And when we went in to kind of secure those funds last June, or kind of request them, there really wasn't any debate. It was like, yes, of course we have to do this. So that's pretty big too. So these are all things that are really very exciting, I think, coming down the line for us. And it's not just our national data sets. We're seeing funding for some of our regional, local data activities as well. The South Atlantic Coastal Study was initiated in 2018. They're getting ready to complete that study, and there's a large amount of geospatial data that's going to be released, and you're going to start seeing that rolled out. And this was done, again, by design. A lot of it is heavily geospatial and data-driven, and that was because it was from some of the lessons learned from the North Atlantic Coastal Comprehensive Study done in the early 2000s. This was something that we learned that we needed to do more geospatial data creation, management, and distribution from that study. So you're going to see a lot of that coming out. So just to summarize, from where I sit, in 1997, we heard the phrase, or it was pretty common to hear, we want to get these geospatial folks out of the back room. Heard that a lot. And we did that. I think we really got them out of the back room, but we put them into a nice glass encased conference room where they've been working very diligently to support different mission areas. But now I think it's time, what we're seeing now is really the full integration of geospatial in with just overall data management. And in many cases, we're not just being integrated, but we're leading those efforts. I really see that in the core, where a lot of the stuff that we've been doing over the last 20 years is really important as some of these agencies really start to embrace data management in trying to get to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and take that next step into all of that. So with that, that's all I have. And I'll turn it back over. I'll just stop sharing. I think that's...
Well, thank you, Nancy. That was a very informative presentation. Just to continue on, in the interest of time, we're going to take the questions at the end of the three presentations, and looks like Kevin's getting ready to go. So Kevin, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Brian. First of all, let me just say it's a pleasure to be here, and always appreciate the support of MAPS and its members. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. If someone would be so kind as to tell me whether or not you're seeing my screen, I'd really appreciate it.
Yes, we've got it, Kevin. Looks
okay,
good.
Perfect. Great. All right. I'm going to jump in then. All right. So a quick agenda. I'm going to go quickly through some history and some future directions of our topographic mapping program, as well as our Landsat satellite program. I'm going to talk a little bit about the vision for USGS and where mapping fits into that. First of all, I want to start with a quote. Hopefully you guys are familiar with John Wesley Powell. He was the second director of the USGS, and of course, a pioneer in not only exploration of the West, but in topographic mapping. And I totally agree with his sentiment here that a government cannot do any scientific work of greater value to the people than by creating proper topographic maps of the country. This is a great description of the beginnings of USGS and the kind of vision that the country had to underpin the expansion of the West and enable the economy through mapping. So I'd like to take an opportunity right now to step through an abridged history of topographic mapping. A little quick timeline to take a look back. It's not all inclusive, but you'll get a sense of sort of where we've been and maybe where we're going to. So the USGS was actually established in 1879, and one of the earliest missions was topographic mapping. This was, as I mentioned, key to the country's early history in terms of expansion of the West and a build out of an early economy. Early topographic mapping was done with field surveying and a lot of manual techniques, and it took over a century to complete the first coverage of topographic mapping across the country. We began to digitally map the country in 2009. We produced the first digital US topo, and then we began to a very bold and aggressive goal at the time to complete the entire national cycle in a 3-year time frame. So quite a contrast between 100 years. The goal became every 3 years, and ever since then we've been successful in replacing all of the US topographic mapping series in the country every 3 years. We added in nape imagery, and starting in 2012, we started to use crowdsourcing as a technique to update some of our data. And that's been a great approach that has really helped us to maintain particularly our structures database. It's important to acknowledge the role of partnerships in topographic mapping. I can't say enough about that. Partnerships began pretty early in our history with states, but of course 3DAP and our NHD examples from today are great exemplars for how important partnerships are, not only state and local government, but of course the private sector. So in the early days, as computer technology became available in the 70s and the 80s, we digitized our topographic maps. We created a partnership with the Census Bureau to complete hydrography and DLGs. And we started to develop the first digital elevation models too, with map contours at 30-meter spacing. The digital ortho program was a pioneered program that really, in my opinion, fueled growth in the private sector, right? And as late as recent as the late 90s, the availability of ortho rectified photos was really leveraged by people like Google and other folks who really saw the potential for what that would mean for society. If we come all the way up to today in our 3D elevation program, which was really built upon the work that was done in 2012 from the National Enhanced Elevation Assessment, this really represents the real maturing of our program as we entered into a total partnership with the private sector, with a wide variety of federal and state and local governments. And we're talking about covering the entire country with high resolution elevation data in only an 8-year period, or at least that was the vision at the time. We've partnered with the EPA using their RF3 data, and we leveraged other partnerships to produce an intelligent network data model called the National Hydrography Data Set. We continue to try to advance that data set. We completed for the first time in 2007 the 24K version of NHD, and since I've been working on the high-res version, which we really hope to well, actually we have completed a beta version in 2020 and hope to see that in full use in places like NOAA's National Water Model and other places soon. So this, I realize I raced through this. There's a lot in the USGS history. Maybe you recognize some of these key points, and we thank you for being part of the history of USGS and getting us to where we are today. I want to switch now to talking about the future, and I've got some swim lanes, and I know it may be difficult to read. Hopefully, you can maybe put on a pair of glasses and help to read this as I walk through it. The top two swim lanes in kind of a light yellow color deal with the US topo delivery. And we're in the midst of another major technology change in the way we deliver our mapping. We're really focused in 21 on redesigning national map services for the cloud. This allows us to move lots of data to people in the most easiest manner, and providing those ready services that are up 24/7 to access the data. We're also entering in a phase in 2022 and beyond where we want to do dynamic mapping. So basically mapping on demand, where rather than waiting around for a USGS quad, a customer can come to the USGS, pick a center point, pick a scale, and automatically generate a map from the most recent data. We're also in the same topo delivery program, still focused on replacing the Alaska topo maps, which we hope to complete actually in this fiscal year. And then we'll start in Alaska, as we have in other parts of the country, beginning to reproduce those topos based on a change model rather than a regular cycle, basically changing where changes have taken place. In our 3D national terrain model, this is the thing that I'm perhaps most excited about. You all have been great partners with us on the 3DEP program, and it's really exciting that we're at 77% of the country right now, with a goal in 2021 at 83%. And by 2023, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but we should be at 100%, which is really saying something, considering that goal seemed very much out of reach when we started the program. And that says a lot about our partnership. But to fill out the full 3D national terrain model, we want to bring in inland bathymetry. And to that extent, we're working on pilots right now that we're going to be used to develop specifications and acquisition plans for filling that out as part of a national data set. We're also working on, as I mentioned, NHD plus high res, including up in Alaska, and we hope to make progress on that steadily in the coming years. Sorry, I jumped around a little bit there. That was a finger fumble with my mouse. One of the things that we're really super excited about, and a really important role, I think, for the MAPS folks, is what we call elevation-derived hydrography, or EDH. Now that we have this high-resolution 3DEP data, deriving the hydrography network allows us to go from roughly 30 million stream reaches in NHD plus high res to over 300 million in the elevation-derived hydrography. This allows us to bring hydrographic modeling to the local scale. That's going to have a tremendously huge impact on the nation and enable all kinds of new applications at local scales. The other thing it's going to do in this blue band here, it's going to provide us the geometry for implementing the national hydrography infrastructure. That is to say, the addressing scheme for the network can be used to link all kinds of water information to the network in the same way that we link information to the road network, thus underpinning what we're referring to as the Internet of Water, and the ability to link water information across the federal government, state and local government, all forms, academia, all forms of water observations can be linked to the network to form a smart, intelligent network. And then the last piece of the 3D National Terrain Model vision is incorporating the engineered hydraulic systems, particularly when you get into the urban areas. It's really unknown what happens to that surface water, and yet it's really important things like flood inundation modeling. And of course, the groundwater piece too is really important to completing our understanding of the hydrologic cycle. So in a nutshell, on this next slide, the 3D National Terrain Model, which we're partnered really closely with NOAA on, is a continuous integrated 3D elevation and hydrography surface. And this is going to enable all kinds of applications. And there's a number of needs immediately that have been identified, including Clean Water Act, some things that is happening right now in the Earth systems modeling, such as the National Water Model, 3D geologic models, and other types of things like that. So next slide. I'm going to switch topics a little bit from topographic mapping to our landslide program and land cover mapping. So again, looking backward, trying to stick with the theme of your session here. The first Landsat satellite launched in 1972, and we've had a whole series, as you can see on the slide, since then. Right now we're operating Landsat 8 and Landsat 7. Over 105 million scenes have been downloaded from the USGS and cloud hosting sites since our data became freely available in October of 2008. This was a huge transition in the history of Landsat. Dirk Kempthorne, then Secretary of Interior, made a decision that this data was going to be released for free. And I will venture to say that this really democratized satellite data worldwide. We soon saw the Europeans coming on board, putting their satellite data from Sentinel, for example, in the public domain. And it's really accelerated the applications of land cover mapping, which you can see here in the bottom right, the different types of things that people use this data for. As we look to the future of our National Land Imaging Program, I want to first call your attention to the key here, the green, blue, orange, or yellow and orange colors. Green being improve our operational capabilities, blue enhancing our research and development and innovation, yellow expanding product and service usability, and orange ensuring community engagement. And so looking a little bit backward to 2013, we launched and we started taking over land flight and ground operations. This gave us some new capability, for example, like thermal band that enabled some new applications, but we really wanted to take up on an effort to thoroughly understand user needs and capabilities and incorporate them into our sustainable land imaging program. So so we did that through some outreach and detailed analyses. In 2016, we started producing what we call analysis-ready data. So taking the Landsat scenes, doing some processing, pre-processing on them, and delivering them in ways that people are ready to use the data. That's really rapidly expanding right now in our program we call Land Change Monitoring, Assessment, and Projection, which I'll talk about in a little more detail on the next slide. We incorporated a few other capabilities along the way. We now house the NCAC, which allows us to access national security space data and generalize that for civilian purposes. And we're really enjoying great expanding relationships internationally right now, working with our European Space Agency and partners as far away as Australia on the democratization of this kind of land remote sensing. In 2021, very exciting, we're getting closer and closer to the launch of Landsat 9. So USGS are building the ground station, NASA's building the satellite and the launch platform, and things are scheduled so far to stay on a 2021, fiscal year 2021 launch at the end of this fiscal year, around the September timeframe. This, of course, also allows us to start thinking about the next generation. So we've had a lot of discussions with NASA about the Landsat Next architecture. It's a disaggregated approach. We're talking about incorporating hyperspectral technology as well as a satellite-borne cross-calibration radiometer. This is going to allow us to compare and evaluate and harmonize data from multiple satellite platforms, not just, for example, government-owned like Landsat and Sentinel, but also be able to do that with commercial satellite data as well. And so by being able to cross-calibrate across platforms, we'll be able to increase the value of the data that's coming down from all of those platforms. And of course, Landsat Next then would be the launched in the 2028 timeframe for sustaining the continuity mission of land cover mapping. So all of this very exciting part of the Landsat's history, we're really on the cusp of some pretty big changes in the way commercial data is delivered, in the way satellites are built and launched, both the kind and the volume of data that can be gathered and how quickly it can be distributed. So lots of great challenging opportunities and exciting things happening in our Landsat program. One of the most exciting things is this program I alluded to earlier, Land Change Science, our Land Change Monitoring, Assessment, and Projection. And if I go back to the USGS history and kind of put this in that context, for years and years and years, and in fact, the Organic Act that created the USGS used the words classify the lands. So for years and years and years, the mapping was about observing and classifying what you're seeing, and then distributing that, of course, in different forms, mostly through maps, but other types of classification. we're really at an exciting point, I think, as a geospatial community right now, where we're able to move from classification to assessment, and from assessment to projection. And this LC-MAP program that we're advancing is a great example of this. We can now look at a 40-year plus history of changes to land cover available through the Landsat program, also available through other programs, including photography, other kinds of photography-based imagery and or other platforms. We've used a machine learning and artificial intelligence technique to evaluate every pixel. So just imagine this, it's a tremendous amount of processing time, but going through every pixel of the entire archive. And then the idea behind LC-MAP is to drive down through history that one pixel and understand all the changes that occurred. So if I could maybe just expand on it a little bit, just imagine a place that was at one point agriculture, and it got converted naturally to forest. But then there was a fire, and it was burnt, and it started back again as barren land, and then it started to grow back into some grassland, and then ultimately it was developed. By looking back at the history of the archive, we can not only understand what happened, but we can look for patterns and actually start to project what might happen as agriculture gets converted, for example, from cotton to another crop. And so we can look at patterns that are economic, that are social, that are science-based, and it's really powerful what we're doing with this assessment and projection technique. So 2 more slides now about the future. I've talked to you a little bit in the past about the Earth map vision that USGS has. It's about Earth systems modeling. It's about understanding the complex processes that occur on the Earth, integrating layers of data to complete a complex picture of what we're seeing, and then do this projection. So key aspects of this: Earth system characterization. That's what we're doing through things like 3DOP and NHD. And then modeling and prediction. That's really the future for USGS. And I think I've shown this diagram to your community before, but I think this, in a nutshell, although this was originally produced by the DoD, I think this really, in a nutshell, describes this transition that we're in right now from, in the past, really being focused on collection. And now we're in a world where through technology, we can process and exploit this information and really produce some intelligence there, and narrowing the field to produce the kind of information products that people really need and want to do their missions. So that's where we are. I know we're saving questions to the end, so I'll stop sharing at this point and stand by.
Kevin, thank you for that very informative presentation. I really wonder what John Wesley Powell would be saying right now, the way you're classifying his land.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be blown away, no question.
Okay.
I don't think he could have ever imagined satellites circling the Earth.
That's right. That's right. All right. Hey, we'd like to bring up Tony LaVoi from NOAA. Tony's our last formal speaker, and then after Tony gets done, we'll all be on the panel together, and we'll entertain the questions from the audience, as well as some of the things that we've prepared to enable some dialogue. Take it away, Tony.
Great. So first, Paul, very much for the opportunity today. NOAA has had the chance on multiple occasions to attend and present at MAPS meetings in the past. I'm going to cover probably a little bit different ground than what we've covered in the past. So keeping with the same theme as Nancy and Kevin, kind of a past, present, and future look at NOAA's geospatial programs. And who knew this was going to be a history lesson today, right? So looking back, NOAA traces our history back to 1807 and back to the Ninth Congress and Thomas Jefferson and the act that was signed to develop the Survey of the Coast, which basically turned into the precursor to the Office of Coast Survey. And one thing I'll mention, because we're often asked, why is it that NOAA is housed within the Department of Commerce? The original Coast Survey was done for both economic and defense purposes. So we've managed to stay in the Department of Commerce for over 200 years. And then much like Kevin had, here's just a real high level look at NOAA's evolution over time, and looking at kind of the core components of the organization as it currently exists today. So in 1870 is when the weather component of the organization came in, first with the U.S. Army Weather and then the U.S. Weather Bureau in 1940. And then there down on the bottom is the Fisheries component of NOAA. So 1871, the commission of the first federal conservation agency, the Fish and Fisheries Commission, and then the first government oceanographic research vessel in 1882. And then in 1996 is when the satellite component precursor in NOAA, when we took over the operational management of the POES satellite. On the bottom is how NOAA is structured today. So we have basically 5 service areas. Weather service, which is easily the most well-known component of NOAA. Ocean service, which has been predominantly the part of NOAA that has spoken to maps in the past. The satellite service, fisheries service, and then our research and development program. And again, much like what Kevin discussed, at its core, NOAA, we are a earth science organization. We collect observations, we do science or do some kind of processing, product development, we create data, we create services, and we also have a long-term archiving responsibility so people can go back and see the prior data that we've collected. From a geospatial perspective, I'll just say I've been with NOAA for over 2 decades. Previously, I was in the GIO role. Now I'm the NOAA Chief Data Officer. And geospatial really is part of our DNA. We do mapping, we do observations from the surface of the sun to the depths of the ocean. We do obviously atmospheric, meteorological, oceanographic, terrestrial. We're fortunate that we have the ability to kind of play in all of the various geospatial domains. When I look at what we do in support of the development of the U.S. National Spatial Data Infrastructure, I feel like we've got a pretty good footprint. On the left-hand side of this slide are the areas that that MAPS members probably have the most familiarity with. So that's geodetic control, the National Geodetic Survey, it's nautical charts and shoreline, the Office of Coast Survey, and elevation, bathymetry. Kevin touched on that a little bit. The parts of the organization you might not know as well are on the right-hand side. So our weather service and our climate service, fisheries and oceans, imagery and satellites, coastal ecosystems. When you look at the numbers, if you look at that bar across the bottom, so for the US NSDI, there are 17 themes, data themes. NOAA either leads or co-leads 4. So we're basically a quarter of the data themes, and we have a responsibility to steward about 15% of the national geospatial data assets. So we feel like we are good contributors to the US NSDI program. How do we do it? One of the big components is the platforms, both that we have available to us as NOAA platforms, but also the partnerships that we have with organizations and members of the MAPS community. So it ranges everything from aircraft and satellites and ships to more and more work in the drone, UAV, sail drone down there in the lower left-hand corner. And then we have a huge supercomputing component to the organization as well, obviously, to drive all the Earth system and weather and oceanographic modeling that we do. At the end of the day, though, it's all in support of NOAA's mission. Here it is at kind of a high level. We're about science, service, and stewardship. So to understand and predict changes in climate, weather, oceans, and coasts. The middle one is the one that I think I most resonate with, which was sharing that knowledge and information with others. We are very much an open by default, open first agency. And then lastly, to conserve and manage coastal and marine ecosystems and resources. So I thought I'd give maybe just a couple of examples. We could spend a lot of time here, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily all that instructive, but just to try to give you some use cases on how we and our partners are using GIS and geospatial data and services to meet critical societal needs, starting with weather data. Weather data is by far the most requested and used data in the NOAA portfolio. It's been a big push for us as an organization over the course of the past decade. We now have somewhere north of 75 or 80 Open Geospatial Consortium compliant web mapping, web coverage, web feature services, all of from the National Weather Service. They are, and this was important because these are used in common operating pictures and dashboards and things like that. We have developed a fully scalable 24/7, 365 dual infrastructure. So we believe that these are hardened services that people can rely on. Next is some work that you're probably familiar with, and I think I actually saw Mike S. Laxon from NGS's name as a panelist. He might have spoken earlier today, but on the right-hand side is some of the emergency response imagery that we collect. It's a big role for NOAA doing, supporting our communities, especially the coastal communities after an event. So whether it's a hurricane or a tornado, quickly collecting imagery and posting it, but also in the ocean environment, the coastal and port environment, getting out and doing rapid surveys of wrecks and destructions, and also oil spill and other environmental kind of issues where we have teams that go out and do assessments on the ground. So also post-event is a big role for NOAA. We've recently been getting, and I guess recently would probably be again in the past 5 to 10 years, more and more interest, not just in information kind of immediately before an event or immediately after an event, but being able to do the planning and the what-if scenarios. A couple of offerings that seem to have gotten a lot of interest and attention. On the left-hand side there, being able to visualize differently storm surge. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and I can tell you that if you tell somebody that a Cat 3 storm is coming and it's going to be 2 feet above mean high water, that doesn't mean anything to the vast majority of the coastal residents. But when you can put together a map like the map on the left, where we've actually taken it and shown what the water level above ground is going to be, that's information that people can act on. So doing that type of work. And on the right-hand side, obviously more and more coastal communities are interested in long-term visualization and planning for sea level rise impacts. Nautical charting, hydrographic data. This is something that the MAPS members have been instrumental working with NOAA over the years. It's a huge part of our geospatial program. And then lastly, we manage the U.S. fisheries. And not only is this a kind of a science-heavy, research and development-heavy part of the organization, but also dealing with regulatory issues and enforcement. And geospatial data has become critical over the past decade in effectively managing those resources. So looking, kind of moving forward is where I wanted to spend, kind of the majority of the time here. And kind of taking this from two perspectives. One, looking at policy and legislation, and then the other looking more at the technology and innovation side of it. The first thing, though, that I did want to do is recognize the support, the long-standing support of the MAPS community for the Digital Coast Act. I assume that many of you saw or heard through some venue that the House passed the Digital Coast Act on Monday. This has already gone through the Senate. It is on its way, hopefully back to the Senate, and the anticipation is they will take it up before the December 10th break. The specific requirements in the legislation include, filling in some of those critical data and information gaps that exist in the coastal area, developing publicly available tools, providing greater focus on underserved areas. Alaska is a big one there, and then documenting best practices. So this has been a long time coming. We're not there yet as a community and as a partnership, but just again wanted to really recognize the support and the role that MAPS has played over the years. Maybe kind of going up a level though, and really looking at the data policy and the legislation framework. And Nancy touched on a little bit of this, but I just kind of wanted to give you my perspective as the kind of the NOAA GIO and CDO. First is what I mentioned on the front end about NOAA being, fortunately, I think, it makes it easier on the data side that we are, as it says there, open as possible, closed as necessary. There are very few data sets, data programs in NOAA that we're not able to share publicly. There's some data, for example, in the Fisheries Service that we're not able to, but for the most part, and that kind of infuses itself in the culture of the organization, which I think is helpful. At the national level, I call it the triumvirate. But if you're in the federal data community right now, these are the three statutes and/or strategies that are taking the vast majority of our attention. So the Evidence Act or Open Data Act, the Geospatial Data Act, and the Federal Data Strategy. They are by far what we're spending the vast majority of our time on. And then in NOAA, we have things as well. Obviously, the Digital Coast Act, Weather App, ocean mapping that we've discussed with MAPS in the past. Maybe a couple of observations. The first one being that from my perspective, I think that this illustrates a heightened congressional interest and knowledge in the data field. Again, kind of echoing what Nancy had said. It's more about data-centric organizations, and the Evidence Act is data-centric policymaking. And I think that the geospatial community is in a really good position to be able to support some of those priority initiatives. Second is it encourages implementation of FAIR principles, and FAIR might be an acronym that some of you, probably most of you, are not familiar with. So FAIR, oh gosh, I just blanked on the F. Accessible, interoperable, reusable, and I blank on the F. But basically, well, I am blanking on it. But the idea being is open data. They're the kind of core open data principles. The third, and again, I think Nancy touched on this at the end. I'm sorry? Findable, thank you, yes. The third bullet there is something that, again, Nancy touched on, which is we really have an opportunity here for closer alignment between the CDO and the GIO domains, if you will. And when you look at the Evidence Act and the Geospatial Data Act especially, there are so many commonalities in the requirements that we would be really remiss if we didn't find a way to bring these two communities together. And then the last one is the one that I think is going to have the biggest impact, at least in NOAA, if not other agencies. And it's all of these policy changes as well as the technology changes are requiring us and providing an opportunity for us to really move beyond how we've done things in the past. How, move beyond, in essence, business as usual. So within NOAA, one of the ways that that's playing itself out is over the course of the past 12, maybe 18 months, we have had a concerted, across the enterprise effort to develop 6 new science and technology strategies. So we have one on artificial intelligence, one on uncrewed systems, maybe more familiar as unmanned systems. The two that are kind of at the foundational level are cloud and data. And then on the right-hand side, citizen science and omics, which is basically genomics for the most part. So these 6 S&T strategies have been developed in tandem. And what I thought I would do is just, there's a lot in them. And I thought from the perspective of this audience, really look at how these strategies are driving not only increasing data needs, but also increasing data volume. So when you look at the uncrewed systems, we're really excited in NOAA at the potential that these platforms are providing to us. At the same time, we're recognizing that there's going to be a considerable increase in the data volumes that are going to be coming into the organization. We need to figure out how to appropriately manage and steward and archive them in the long run. Omics is all about, as you can see there, DNA, RNA, proteins, and there's huge data volumes associated here as well. When you start looking at things like acoustics and imagery and video, as well as increasing computational demand. So that's where artificial intelligence comes in. We have high hopes that AI is going to help us to be able to address some of the ever-increasing data volumes, to be able to train our AI systems and validate and bring more AI applications into the organization. I will note that Senator Gardner from Colorado has issued or is sponsoring legislation on the development of a NOAA AI Center. So we're interested in that, seeing how that progresses. And then citizen science, and this is not so much an issue of data volumes as it is some different data considerations. So data ownership, the provenance, where did the data go? It's kind of outside of the government system. So how was that data handled? Its quality, and then probably most importantly, fitness of use. We're very excited about the possibilities of citizen science data as an organization, trying to figure out, how do we incorporate it into our science, our R&D, and our operational missions. And this is what it ends up looking like if you kind of come at it from probably mostly from an IT-centric perspective. And you've all seen these same graphs. So on the left-hand y-axis is the volume of data in the NOAA archives. And on the right-hand side is the annual ingest. And the main thing to note is that there's an ever-increasing line or increasing slope on that red line there. And somewhere horizontally, there should be a line that says, above this, NOAA doesn't currently have budget to handle if we continue to do data management and data storage in the same way that we've always done. So much like, again, we're not anything special, but like most of the other agencies and organizations, and I think companies as well, we're all trying to look at moving to the cloud. So I try to look at this from the perspective of kind of the MAPS community, and my guess is you probably don't care a whole heck of a lot about how we're doing our internal business, how we're managing our data and all that, how we're managing our IT resources. You're probably more interested in how do we improve the experiences for people who use our geospatial data and services. So a couple of kind of observations or considerations. One of the first things that movement to the cloud does provide is an opportunity to revisit those legacy systems, those legacy processes for working with and provisioning NOAA data and services. Ultimately, ideally, when you move to the cloud, you'd have the opportunity to completely re-architect and re-engineer and redeploy. That doesn't always happen, frankly. Sometimes you only have enough resources to be able to move to the cloud to change, who's managing your infrastructure, and you don't actually have that opportunity. But it is something that is available. I'll put it at that point. The second is we anticipate that as we move more and more of our data provisioning and processing to the cloud, it's going to improve the user experience. Right now, there are NOAA systems that have network limitations, and at high loads, our customers are not able to get access to the data in the way in which they want. So we're hoping that by moving to the cloud, not only does it improve the user experience, but it also decreases the load on the NOAA systems, which is positive. Third, cloud native tools and approaches. It's a lot more than just taking your current tool set and moving it into a new environment. There are hundreds of cloud native tools and apps. I was on a call yesterday with AWS, Amazon, and I think the number was something like 25 or 30 new tools or apps being deployed on a monthly basis. So they're continuing to evolve those platforms, which is fantastic. The caveat there is that in some instances, it's going to require the data to be transformed. In NOAA, we've got all kinds of funky data formats, NetCDF, GRIB, buffer, all of these things that there's reasons why we have these formats. Ideally, when we move to the cloud, it would increase the value, we believe, of the data if we could convert or translate. We just don't always have the resources to make that happen. Another big one is allowing users to compute on cloud platforms versus downloading data to the on-premise systems. Ultimately, we put NOAA data up in the cloud. It would be great if researchers, companies brought their algorithms, their models, and ran them resident on those cloud platforms as opposed to having to download NOAA data and maintain their own systems. And then lastly, we think it's an opportunity to provide business and research opportunities for NOAA stakeholders and partners. And an example of that, I don't know if we've ever spoken with the MAPS membership about this before, but NOAA's big data program. So this was something that started 5 years ago as a research and development. They were actually cooperative research and development agreements with 5 of the major cloud service providers. We, in the past year, kind of signed off on the CRADA aspect of this and moved into contracts. And Amazon, Google, and Microsoft were all interested. So we now have contracts in place. These are very low dollar contracts. And I mean low dollar, it's it's in the 3 digits annually. And the idea here is that we each have something that we bring to the partnership. So what NOAA brings is our science and subject matter expertise. The industry brings their data storage and cloud expertise. And then the hope then is that the industry with their partners bring the user-focused tools and processing. Where we stand right now is over 135 NOAA data sets have moved to one or all of the cloud service platforms. About 6 petabytes of data. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon where you sit, it's almost entirely weather and satellite data, but we are making a strong push in the organization to put more ocean and coastal data into the BDP. And the big advantage here is that data sits in the public data set program buckets, if you will, of each of the cloud service providers. If a user wants to egress that data, so if a company wanted to pull that data down, there's no cost for egress. But if they want to stay and compute, that's an opportunity that's available to them. So the NOAA Big Data Program is one of the ways that we're hoping to think a little bit differently about how we provision our data. So that's just a short, kind of tough to cover all of NOAA in 20 minutes, but just kind of give you an idea of the journey our geospatial programs have gone through, starting back at 1807 with Coast Survey and then the inclusion of fisheries and weather and expansion and now all these new technologies. And maybe a final thought here is that, what we've found is that success is based on sound science, on addressing stakeholder requirements, on a commitment to quality and openness, and on strong partnerships. And I think those stand kind of irrespective of the policy framework, the legislative framework, or the technology framework. Those are just good ways to go about doing business. So with that, if you're not aware, we do have the NOAA Geospatial platform. This is our Esri ArcGIS online platform. You can get access to basically all of NOAA's geospatial data services, story maps. And with that, just thank you all very much.
Hey, well, thanks, Tony, for that informative presentation and the shout out to MAPS working with NOAA on the Digital Coast Act and other things related to policy and mapping programs. So I'd like to invite Nancy and Kevin back on. Tony, why don't you join us as well? Get the Hollywood Square stars up here. So Nancy and Tony. There we go. Great. Tony, I love your office.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so I'm sure Nancy's on her way.
Can you see me? It's kind of frozen.
Is it? Well, we've got your voice.
We hear you.
We hear you. The camera's on. I don't know. Okay.
Well, what in the interest of time, Nancy, we'll just get together, and we're glad you have at least voice. There we go.
There we go.
Good to see you all.
Take a minute.
Okay. Thank you so much for those presentations. I think what it shows is this history and lineage and depth of the U.S. mapping programs that I think every country in the United States would just love to have just a fraction of it. And you know, I heard collaboration, you know, and you guys talking about other entities that you partner with throughout your presentations. Really appreciate that. And then just the innovation and the ideas and the vision of where you want to take not only data collection, but really put this into some actionable, you know, uses to better our country. So with that, I'd like to just get into a little dialogue with y'all. And you know, I believe it's a great time to be in the geomatics profession. You know, actually, I've been saying that for about 40 years, but because it just changes, you know, so much. But even now, you know, with that said, and maybe Kevin, you can kick us off with this. You know, what's the most advanced technology or thing in the workplace that you've seen that really has had some positive impacts on your agency?
Well, just real quickly, gut reaction. You know, the technology we're using right now to work virtually has been essential during this COVID time, and amazingly has eked even more productivity out of the organization, which really surprised me. And we've been on this curve for probably 30 years of eking more productivity out of folks with technology, but with this is a whole nother level. That's been really interesting. But if we consider the mapping program itself, I can't say enough about what high resolution data has done for our mapping program. New applications just abound from, and even more on the horizon from intelligent vehicle navigation and what elevation means for electric cars, for example, which need to know the elevation of the route that they're about to take to calculate the range of that battery, to applications that I've seen like assessing the level of water quality derived from channeling across the state of Maryland, a study done by AECOM, or the solar potential of rooftops from high resolution elevation data. So the high resolution data and the number of applications that come out of it has been really transformative, and I think it will continue to be for a while for the country. The new platforms, Mike alluded to this, the uncrewed systems, the potential for high altitude platforms. I think we're on the cusp of what will be a major change in the way we collect and deliver data. I talked a little bit about the data sciences and the shift from classifying to assessing and projecting into the future. I think that that exploitation of the data that's been collected over the years is a real a place that's going to see some real, not only innovation, but discovery. We're actually thinking that through data science, we'll create new understanding of processes. And I'll give you one example is, you know, we've had 3 or 4 years running now of the worst fire seasons on record. We can go back in the archive and we can see the kinds of things, for example, soil moisture or forest density, the types of land cover, things that have proximity to development, things that have really pre-fire patterns that really dictate what and potentially predict what fires might be like. The ability to go into the data and to search for, identify patterns, and then project is incredibly powerful as we look forward. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention new availability of commercial data. As the commercial industry really starts to build out new satellite platforms, new forms of technology in terms of acquiring various types of data and at different scales, this, what's the word I'm looking for? This commoditization of data, you know, turning, for example, what Planet is doing with imagery and, you know, on a daily basis, capturing the entire Earth at a, you know, 1 to 3 meter scale. That kind of commoditization of data is going to blow open the doors on a lot of new applications as well. So I know I've covered a lot of ground there, but there's some pretty exciting stuff happening across the board.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nancy or Tony, would you like to address anything that question on you know, what's the most exciting advancement in technology and et cetera?
So I'll take a stab at it. And I want to follow on with some of what Kevin and Tony talked about in their presentations about the cloud environment. I know it's old technology to some folks, but for the Corps, it's always been very difficult for us being in DoD to take advantage of things like cloud environment until recently. And now that we're seeing that, I think this is huge for us because we spend an awful lot of time pulling data from the field, whether it be regulatory or, you know, some of our other programs. We do a lot of field data collection, bringing it into a secure environment, processing, doing stuff with it, and then pushing it back out. And I think by putting all the processing and getting all of that all those services and everything, taking advantage of that in a cloud environment will be huge for us. We won't have to like really move the data around different networks. And I think we're about there. I also think this is really huge for our industry partners because we still have a hard time with some of these, you know, delivering data, you know, our deliverables are pretty large. And if we can set something up that's easier for us to work more collaboratively in this cloud environment, which we are really, I think we're there. I think this will be huge for both of us. The other area is Kevin talked about this autonomous vehicles and the UAS programs. This is also large, but what I'm also seeing is, and I hadn't thought about this until this year, for hydrographic surveying, these survey vessels, autonomous survey vessels, this is pretty, I think, further off in the future, but that would be huge for us also, is to be able to take advantage of some of that sort of technology for hydrographic surveying.
Tony, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just real quickly, AI and machine learning for us is by far the most exciting. We think it has the potential to reach across every part of NOAA's mission. And when you look at that graph, it shows those ever increasing data volumes and all the new platforms. We've got to figure out a way to be able to deal with all that data that's coming in. Remember, we're a big part of the organization is operational, flying satellites, doing weather forecasting, water levels, all of that, and being able to take advantage of AI and machine learning to automate and improve the quality in the science. That's a lot of promise, a lot of hope in the organization, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and you combine some of the analytics and change detection things that the USGS is working on with the weather, information that NOAA is creating, and levee and dam, and information that the Corps has, getting this real-time look ahead of what could happen in the future is really, really super exciting. Hey, we got a question coming in, so I'm going to go off script, panelist. I don't know if some of you saw the question about microsatellites, stratolites, et cetera. Are your agencies looking at that kind of data? I know, Nancy, you just mentioned something about that, as a role in your data collection or activities using some of those data sets and technologies.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So we just got a question in about the future role of some of the microsatellites and stratolites and other things like that to collect data for your projects or programs.
Okay, and so yeah, I think a lot of that is huge for us, and also like putting on, having all these sensors and within our to help manage the infrastructure, embedding them in with with some of the dams and levees. They're starting to look at some of that, and I know our geotech folks are heavily involved in trying to get some of that information, get kind of hooked into that. So really very, very excited about some of that coming down. And it's like I alluded to with the cloud thing, it's always really difficult for us in DoD because there are so many potential security issues and things like that. So we never can like implement something right away. It takes a little time, but when we do, and we saw this with the UAS program, once we figure out exactly the rules for the road within DoD, we're able to really implement it and it really take advantage of some of this stuff. So it is very much promising for our organization.
I'll just quickly say the same. We're the kind of data that we're interested in, hyperspectral, radiometric, airborne electromagnetic. Anytime we inventory the amount of data that we have like that across the country, it always comes up short. We always want more than we have. We always want higher resolution than we have. And the thought that that a stratolite could sit up there for some period of months with a specially designed instrument to collect a lot of data over a large area, that's very exciting to us. That's a potential.
Great. Looks like we've got time for another question. So you guys talked about the opportunities and the vision and stuff like that. What do you guys see as the biggest challenge towards realizing that vision moving forward in the future? So
the F word.
The F word.
Funding.
Yeah, I'd put out another one. I mean, yeah, funding's always going to be at the top of the list. One thing that's really been getting a lot of attention in NOAA recently is the issue of recruiting, retaining, and reskilling our workforce to adapt to all these new technologies. So I talked about, the 6 new science and technology strategies that we have out there, and there's concern on whether we're going to be able to, whether it's through federal employment or through contract partners, academic partners, to be able to get the necessary skill sets. So that's definitely something. I can tell you that in the 6 science and technology strategies, each of them has either a goal or kind of a preeminent objective focused specifically on workforce and workforce development. And we're trying to right now work with our Human Capital Services program to figure out a way to potentially create new positions, new training opportunities, new internships, cooperative institutes agreements, because we recognize that if we don't have the staff and the contract support, we're not going to be able to realize the vision that we've laid out. So that's definitely one that's front of mind for many of us.
And I think that's a really good point. Just going back quickly to what I was joking about with the F word, we're in on a more serious note where we're in the midst of a national crisis where we've put trillions of dollars on the table for relief, and at some point in the coming years, and maybe in the not too distant future, I think we're going to have to take a hard look at the budget deficit, and the domestic agencies are typically the first to look for reductions. And so you're looking at 3 agencies right here that really in terms of the national budget have pretty modest budgets. And it's hard to argue that we don't get a lot for that money. When the kind of data information that we're producing that's so essential to things like weather forecasting or our basic science, or in Nancy's case, infrastructure. I'm really, of course, I'm really passionate about this issue, but I think every dollar that you put into the kind of programs that we're doing has big returns to the country. But being able to communicate that message in an increasingly competitive federal budget environment is always a challenge for us.
Yeah, and I would echo both what Kevin and Tony have said. I think one of the big challenges I see is just this willingness not to put the effort, the time and effort into putting a plan together. Everybody wants everything today. They see all this technology, they see everything, and they want it done like now. And it takes a little, this is complicated stuff, right? And it takes a little bit of time to figure this out. And that's one of my biggest challenges, or the ones that I see. I mean, definitely the funding, and I agree with Tony, definitely, where these skilled people are going to come from. Hopefully we'll do that. But just organizationally, just taking putting together a plan and having the patience and the persistence to see it through, I think is something that I have always had a challenge with.
Okay. David, those are great responses to go along with your very insightful presentations.